I hope I can give my thoughts justice here for what's been racing through my mind about life is not about finding oneself, but creating oneself. As I got to Tulsa the first day, that was, I guess, the first thing I saw as I looked through the window at the Bob Dylan Center, and then I walked down a few blocks and went to Greenwood Rising and saw the quote from James Baldwin about how we must face things. I've been obsessed with this concept as I've been striving to find my true path. Mostly happy with my life, but certainly not satisfied with my career. Just never got satisfaction, or at least in a long time I have not gotten satisfaction from my work. Maybe I did in 2005, but not really since then. It's just been too stressful, and all the politics and the sharp elbows, it's misery for me. So Ikigai is this Japanese concept for finding your life's purpose. And it's an intersection of 4 indexes. And those are what you're passionate about, what you're good at, what society needs, what society will pay you for. And the intersection of those 4 things is your life's purpose, or at least your career's purpose. And I, to some degree, have found such a thing with the path that I've been on for the last few years. However, it is not a slam dunk, and I'm not pursuing it with the zeal required to make it successful quickly. Successful in the long run, yeah, but to really do something big, because I have been anticipating doing this basically on my own, it's going to take a long time, it's going to be hard, and I've been struggling with that. It's funny though, throughout all of this, I've been trying my best to lean into what my heart tells me to do. And I have no real strong family ties to Tulsa. I have, my cousin lives there, my uncle lives there, but my, dad's gone, mom moved to Georgia, brother moved to Georgia, aunt moved to Georgia. So my family is really in Georgia now. And so we go see them, of course, but I keep going back to Tulsa. And yes, I have a lot of friends there. And the depth of my relationships with these people that goes back decades is just so powerful and so affecting for me and so necessary for me to feel myself. So I go back as much as I can, and it seems that it's going to be basically I go as long as I can once a year during the summer when I can take the kids, or at least I can get away. So I was able to get away since the kids were at camp. But yeah, I could have gone anywhere on this planet in that time. Valerie had to stay back and work in Manhattan. So I could go and do what I pleased. I go to Tulsa. I drive and I see other places along the way, but I want to go to Tulsa and hang out there. And I got to kind of hang out there for 3 days before I ended up seeing like 5 people a day, and it just becomes this hectic, seeing people, which is awesome, but it's also exhausting for an introvert like me. So it just becomes this frenzied dash, even though I was there for, I guess, 2 weeks. It's just crazy though. I keep going back. I maintain the relationships that are so special to me and to my family. And I do my best to honor them. And I mean, truly, I step foot out of my car, and when I roll into Oklahoma, and my feet hit the ground, and I feel like the roots just go 5 miles deep into the earth. It's just so powerful to me, and I can't explain it in any rational way. It's just how I feel. The left lane hogs are really annoying. I'm trying to drive correctly, but since nobody moves in the left lane, you're just stuck. You just have to stay in the left lane. So that's why I'm seeming so distracted driving here. I guess I'm just going to park in the left lane with everybody else. So I get to Tulsa on the evening of the 3rd of July, and I go into Torchy's on the 4th of July, because I always go to Torchy's, and that's kind of my cafeteria while I'm in town, although I did a better job of trying many of the other taco establishments in town, and there are many good ones. And a guy sits down next to me, and he looks like he's a powerful guy. I'm just curious. I figure I'll start chatting with him, and he's very friendly, and it's very clear that we share a lot of years, it's been a very exciting time for Tulsa. And it became clear that we had a lot of mutual connections and very interested in the new places opening up. A lot of the work with the George Kaiser Family Foundation helped to, if not entirely, bankrolled the Gathering Place, a $465 million park, and a lot of the Tulsa Arts District area where the Woody Guthrie Center is and the Bob Dylan Center is. All of the sad but necessary attention given to the Tulsa Race Massacre and the ongoing tragedy there. Awareness, it starts with being aware. So many of us didn't know. So, Tulsa has a lot of ways it needs to grow and reckon with its past and reckon with its present even. But there's a lot of exciting things happening there, and I just love talking with people about it. And this man Tim Whalen, it was great talking with him. And as I had to go see some friends, and I'm sure he did too, he said, hey, if you want a special tour of the Bob Dylan Center, just let me know. And we exchanged contact information. I thanked him and didn't plan to ask for that because I just didn't feel right for just me to have that. As much as I would have enjoyed it, I just didn't want to burden somebody and take somebody's time when they could be doing something that would be more helpful to the Bob Dylan Center. So anyway, the next day I'm working in my office while I'm in town at the Gathering Place in the Williams Lodge in this gorgeous space with an amazing view. I get a text from my friend and former client, David Vanderpool, and he let me know that his wife, Ashley, and he were going to be coming through Tulsa. And Ashley is a very accomplished marketer. She was head of global sustainability at Coca-Cola. She's a consultant for Slalom, as is husband David. And David is a guy I've known since 2008 when I worked at Buddy Media, and he was my Coca-Cola client. Always thought was so cool. In 2004, 2005, YouTube was a new thing. And around 2006, these guys in white lab coats, they looked kind of nerdy like scientists, and they were called Eepybird, EEPYBIRD, back when I guess we had silly usernames because YouTube was really informal. It was like a social network less than it was a publishing platform like it is today. And they started posting these videos of them taking these Minto pellets, dropping them in a Diet Coke 2-liter bottle, and then they would spew out everywhere, and they were able to make them into these fountains and were creating all of these intricate and artfully choreographed Mentos Diet Coke bottles. They would have hundreds of them in a shot. It was really cool. Everybody was talking about it. They did write-ups in the media, got tons of effectively free publicity for Diet Coke, and just made them look cool. They were already the number one brand, or Coca-Cola was the number one brand in the world, but this was a really cool way to enter the social media age. Meanwhile, because they were protecting the IP of their brand, central component of their stock price after all, the lawyers started sharpening their pencils at Coca-Cola, and they were going to send a cease and desist letter and shut the whole thing down, which nowadays it seems insane, but at the time that's just how things were done. And David was at the time leading the Coca-Cola social media program, which was, there's a bunch of cool things. I remember him walking me through all the different apps that they were running, but at the time Facebook was just basically a place for sharing apps, and the news feed didn't come out until the next year. So that became a publishing platform in a different way than YouTube, but at the time that's what you did. So social media was very small, although there were a lot of people using it. Brands were just experimenting with different things, seeing what would work and getting a little bit of good buzz out of it, and maybe the kids would think that the brands were cool, but that's really all that they could do. There was no ROI, return on investment, on anything that you could put up there. It was just all hoping for the best and trying to learn from the experience. Anyway, David understood that this was a huge opportunity. It was a game changer opportunity. And he was the one who went to, I don't know if it's the lawyers or executives, I wasn't there, and he convinced them to not shut it down, to let it go, to let it be, and see what happened. And he was able to produce data, sales data, that showed that there had been, in fact, a sales bump after this happened. Because, of course, people were seeing the brand and thinking about it and thinking it was cool. So, of course, they started buying more of it. And because there was a positive ROI that you could directly attribute to a social media initiative, a new industry was born. Go David. Anyway, he sends me a text on July 5th, the day after I met Tim, and I had been planning to leave the following Wednesday. After being in Tulsa for a week and a half, my Airbnb was going to be up. So I figured I'd drive down to Dallas and see Jim and see some other folks and take my time going back and see more of America. But David and Ashley were going to be coming into town. It's really cool. They were driving from Atlanta to LA to see one of their friends get married in LA. And so they're doing a true cross-country trip, which is the coolest thing in the world. So they're driving and then they rent a car and then they're going to fly back. I understand that they are in New Mexico. They were in Amarillo earlier. They saw the big Texan, the big cow and the 72-ounce steak. Free if you can eat the whole thing at once. So David said, hey, it looks like we're going to be in town next Thursday. Will you be there? Well, I was going to be gone, but I was like, no, I got to stay. So I told him, absolutely. And so I immediately started writing up what I saw as the itinerary for their visit because I wanted to show them all the things. And then I was like, hey, I met Tim and he offered. And so I took him up on it. So I wrote him back and I said, thank you so much for your offer. Here's who David and Ashley are. I think it's a good idea for me to call in this favor. I think it's a really important thing for me to bring them through here and show them this place. He wrote back, he absolutely agreed, and let me know that he had spoken with Steve Higgins, who is the director of the whole thing, the Bob Dylan Center and the Woody Guthrie Center. Absolutely the person that I want to make sure David meets and meets David. He's very into music. Also, he was an art major in college. So I was like, well, we've got to take him in to meet Scott Stewin, the director over at Philbrook. And of course, I want to take him to the Gathering Place. And I was hoping to take them to the church, which is Leon Russell's old studio that they have restored it back to its former glory, made it an amazing recording studio for musicians. I mean, it's a hot, in-demand recording studio. So I knew that David would want to see that, but they closed at 3 o'clock, so we couldn't get there. It was unfortunate, but I felt it was more important that we spent that time with Steve Higgins and the Bob Dylan Center and the Woody Guthrie Center, and then that time at Philbrook, showing them Philbrook, and then meeting Scott. And Scott is an amazing visionary leader, not only of Philbrook, but the arts community in Tulsa. So we sat down and we talked and we went through all the things, and it's so impressive what Scott has managed to do in his 5 years at Philbrook. David, with decades of experience, was able to cut through and really summarize what Scott was saying and the challenges that they were having. There's a really good dialogue that I think we all grew from participating in. And Scott certainly encouraged us to be in touch. He was working on a coalition. The main issue that we can help with is figuring out how to get more tourists to Tulsa. Tulsa has built up an incredible variety and quantity of amazing things. There's the $465 million Gathering Place. There's the 12 craft breweries in Tulsa that were mostly within walking distance of each other. It's incredibly cool downtown with the Woody Guthrie Center, a museum dedicated to his life. It's beautiful. They have a Bruce Springsteen exhibit there right now. And then, of course, the Bob Dylan Center, which opened in May. You've got the Guthrie Green, which is very cool down there. Amazing restaurants down there. We got to go to Lowwood Thursday night and had an incredible meal, then walked over next door to Hodges Bend and had our nightcap beverages. We were talking. I mean, we were all so inspired by the day. And I'm neglecting to mention a bunch of other really interesting things that are going on in Tulsa, like, for instance, the Tulsa Tough Bike Race. So there are so many incredibly exciting things that are available to see in Tulsa. And if you were a tourist to come through, you could easily spend a week. If you actually want to spend any time at all with some of these collections, and I really dive into them and take advantage of what is there. You really would need a week. I mean, it is a destination in of itself. And then you look at, what, I don't know, 50 miles away, maybe it's more than that. Tulsa is the nearest city to Bentonville, Arkansas, which is where the headquarters of Walmart is. And when you consider the kind of wealth that Walmart has created for the Walton family and its executives in the area, it only makes sense that a lot of exciting things would be popping up there, including the, I believe, $500 million Crystal Bridges Museum just outside of Bentonville. It's certainly a short drive away. It's definitely a day trip. That's how I've been there. I went there with Dad and Wes and my brother 5 years ago. It's amazing. It's an engineering marvel. You see where the money went. And the collection is amazing too. And it's cool to go downtown Bentonville and see Sam Walton's famous pickup truck, and you see the first Walton's store. So it's amazing. There's so much to see here. If you're a fan of music, beer, art, food, there's so much there. Meanwhile, Gilcrease is building its new $75 million building, and Frank Mulhern walked me through the 3D plans of it on Wednesday, and it's gonna be stunning. It's really gonna be an amazing space. The Gilcrease collection is one of a kind in the world, and the story of how it came to be is fantastic. Thomas Gilcrease, I believe he was an Osage Indian, was deeded a parcel of land, as were many of the native peoples, which was a terrible thing to them. Hopefully we all know about the Trail of Tears and how awful that was, and how the United States government at the time considered what they called Indian Territory, nowadays Oklahoma, basically the most useless land in the Union. And then in the early 1900s, or actually the late 1800s, they discovered that there was some oil there. And as it happens, young Thomas Gilcrease had the deed of the land for the Glen Pool, which in short time became the largest oil field on the planet. It was all his. So he took all of that and thankfully was wise. Interesting character. And while his wealthy counterparts, say in New York, were buying up the old European masters like the Rembrandts, he recognized that American art, like the Thomas Moran's and the Frederick Remingtons, were also great art and should be appreciated as well. And he could also buy it for a song. So he proceeded to buy all of it, and that went into his collection. And in the 1950s, they opened up the Thomas Gilcrease Museum. They, I believe, only have about 2 to 3% of the collection on display at one time. It's a phenomenal collection. I could give the list of all the different things. I don't know it as well as I should. Anyway, there's that. There's Philbrook, which is a marvel. It's the crown jewel of Tulsa and Oklahoma. Absolutely, for sure. Always has been, always will be, because there's nothing like Philbrook. The architecture downtown is amazing, and there aren't many people alive that know all of this stuff as well as I do. And I know all of this history, basically the same kind of thing for New York City. These two cities have just captured my imagination for as long as I can remember. And so with this in mind, and knowing my family's connections and involvement in the city going back decades, and the fact that my parents brought my brother and me into this, I mean, we were free labor, and my parents' friends just were my friends. I still stay in touch with them, and a lot of these folks are deeply involved in the community, and I know everybody. If I need to do something, just had never occurred to me before yesterday morning, what to do with it, what to do about it, how I could help, how I could make a difference, how I could make my hometown better. It's already has these amazing things, but nobody knows outside of Tulsa. And in a lot of cases, just the same way, I've never taken my kids to the Statue of Liberty. I did take Hannah to the top of the Empire State Building. There's so many things that we never get around to doing, even though we live 12 miles from Manhattan. we're busy. We have our lives, and frankly, the kids aren't interested in a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, I would argue that the attractions in Tulsa are way more approachable. I mean, just hop in your car and like everything's basically within a 3-mile radius. So nothing is more than 10 minutes apart. A lot of it is walking distance, which is really cool, by the way. It's a major advantage over New York and any other major city for that matter. So David, Ashley, and I have this amazing day where, I mean, we get into it, we duke it out. And as I'm driving south toward Norman to see Claude Miller, professor at OU and my Facebook friend for like 8 or 9 years, but I'd never met him in person until yesterday, it occurred to me that this is my Ikigai intersection point. I love Tulsa very deeply. It's much bigger than me or any one person. Like, I feel it deeply in my heart. I mean, I tear up thinking about my hometown. I do. I love it. I know it's flawed. I know it has all of this horrible history, and there's a lot of tough stuff that's going on there now. But one thing I can do to help is to bring in jobs and revenue, tax revenue, people who are homeless and down on their luck. Well, give them some bounty. You can do a lot of good. So that's where I'm needed. And again, what I love, what I'm passionate about, what I know so much about, not only Tulsa, but New York City. I understand the distinctions between the places. I understand what makes Tulsa truly unique because I've been away from it. Even though I come back, I've lived away from it for more than 20 years, if you include my time in Minneapolis and Indiana. I've lived in New York for 19 and a half years. So I have the perspective of knowing the place really well, but also outside of it and what people think of it and what they don't understand, their ignorance. And I mean, I take it deeply personally when somebody puts down my hometown, and I do my best to turn around and say, hey, no, you don't know. Let me tell you, let me explain. Let me share some stories with you about this place. It's really special. And sometimes I win them over, but before David and Ashley, I don't think I'd ever actually convinced anybody to come check the place out. And I recognize this, and I wanted to make sure I could show them as much as I possibly could, not only show them the place, but introduce them to the people. The people who can make a difference, the people who can pull the levers, and it can tell us if there's anything that we can do to help. And talking with Scott Stuhlin and Steve Higgins, and then some conversations I've had since then with some other folks, there is a clear need for us to pull this together. And I know exactly what to do. I know who to help me do it, not only in the marketing, advertising, consulting industries, but also back home in Tulsa. So I'm passionate about it. I'm good at it. Society, Tulsa needs me to do it, and I can get paid for it. Ikigai. I found my life's purpose at age 45.